The cold December wind swept through downtown Chicago, rattling the towering glass buildings and carrying with it the distant sound of police sirens. Most people hurried home before nightfall, but in Chicago everyone knew one thing. When the sun went down, the city belonged to one man, Adrian Moretti. To the public, Adrian was a billionaire businessman who owned luxury hotels, shipping companies, restaurants, and construction firms across the United States. But behind the polished suits and magazine covers, he was the most feared mafia boss in Chicago. Even rival crime families refused to speak his name loudly. People didn't fear Adrian because he was cruel. They feared him because he never broke his word. If he promised protection, no one dared touch you. If he promised justice, no one escaped it. Inside the magnificent Moretti mansion, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Warm lights glowed from crystal chandeliers. Christmas decorations covered every corner. Soft piano music echoed through the enormous living room. Emma Moretti stood beside the nursery window with one hand resting gently on her pregnant belly. 7 months. Soon, their baby would enter the world. Emma smiled as she folded tiny baby clothes. She imagined Adrian carrying their child for the first time. The thought alone brought tears to her eyes. Suddenly, 2 warm hands wrapped gently around her waist. "You've been standing too long," Adrian whispered. Emma smiled without turning around. "I knew it was you." Adrian kissed her forehead. "How? You always smell like cedarwood and expensive cologne." He laughed quietly. "I guess I can't surprise my wife anymore." Emma turned around and looked into his blue eyes. Despite being the most feared man in Chicago around her, he looked like an ordinary husband, a man completely in love. "I missed you," Emma whispered. "I was gone for only 6 hours. It felt longer." Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I promise. After our baby is born, I'll spend more time at home." Emma looked at him silently. "You've made that promise before." Adrian lowered his eyes. She wasn't wrong. Every time he tried to leave the Mafia behind, another war began. Another enemy appeared. Another family needed protection. He had built an empire, but sometimes it felt as if the empire owned him. Across the mansion, someone watched them from the second-floor balcony. Victor Moretti, Adrian's younger brother. His face remained expressionless, but inside, jealousy burned like fire. Everything belonged to Adrian. The mansion, the businesses, the respect, the power. Even Emma. Victor clenched his fists. "One day, everything will be mine." No one heard him. Later that evening, the entire Moretti family gathered for dinner. Long marble table, silver candles, elegant silence. Emma laughed as Adrian tried to assemble a tiny wooden toy for their future baby. "You've negotiated with dangerous cartels, but you can't build a toy." Everyone smiled, except Victor. Their elderly family advisor, Lorenzo, watched Victor carefully. Years of experience had taught him something important. A smiling enemy wasn't always dangerous. The quiet one usually was. After dinner, Adrian entered his private office. Several trusted captains waited for him. One of them spoke. "We found the shipment." Another added, "But someone leaked our route." Silence filled the room. Adrian slowly looked around. "There is a traitor." Nobody dared breathe. "I don't know who, but I will." He stood. "Until then, no one leaves Chicago without my permission." The meeting ended. Yet unknown to Adrian, the traitor wasn't inside that room. The betrayal was much closer. It lived under the same roof. Near midnight, Victor quietly entered a hidden wine cellar beneath the mansion. Behind an old bookshelf, a secret steel door opened. Inside, 3 rival Mafia leaders waited. Victor smiled. "The king still trusts me," one of the men asked. "When do we move?" Victor placed a map on the table. "In 3 days. My brother leaves on a secret mission." "What about Emma?" Victor's smile grew colder. "Leave her to me." The room fell silent. Everyone understood. Victor wasn't just planning a takeover. He was planning to erase Adrian completely. Meanwhile, upstairs, Emma couldn't sleep. She found Adrian standing alone on the balcony, staring across Chicago's skyline. "What are you thinking about?" He didn't answer immediately. Finally he said, "When I was a child, I thought power meant freedom." He smiled sadly. I was wrong. Emma slipped her hand into his. Then leave it. I can't. Why? Because too many innocent people depend on me now. Emma rested her head on his shoulder. Just promise me one thing. Anything. No matter what happens. Come back to me. Adrian gently touched her stomach. And to our baby. I swear. Neither of them knew. Those would become the most important words Adrian would ever speak. The next morning, black SUVs lined up outside the mansion. Bodyguards prepared for departure. Emma walked Adrian to the front gate. She adjusted his tie. When will you be back? 3 days. Promise? He smiled. I never break promises. Emma hugged him tightly. For a brief second, Adrian hesitated. Something didn't feel right. Years of surviving betrayals had sharpened his instincts. His heart warned him. Don't go, but duty won. He kissed Emma one last time. I love you. I love you more. The convoy slowly disappeared down the long driveway. Emma stood there until the last vehicle vanished from sight. She had no idea. This goodbye was about to change her life forever. Hundreds of miles away, a black helicopter lifted into the cloudy sky. Adrian looked out of the window. His mission had begun. Hidden in another vehicle several miles behind, Victor picked up a secure satellite phone. It's time, he said. A cold voice replied. The trap is ready. Victor looked toward the distant highway and smiled. By tomorrow, the king will disappear. The morning fog covered the interstate as Adrian Moretti's convoy headed toward a private airfield outside Chicago. Inside the lead SUV, Adrian stared quietly out the window. Something felt wrong. During his years in business, he had learned to trust his instincts. He looked at his security chief. Call Emma. The call rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Adrian smiled faintly. She's probably still asleep. A few moments later, the convoy reached the airfield. A private jet waited on the runway. As Adrian stepped onto the aircraft, he turned one last time toward the gray Chicago skyline. I'll be home in 3 days, he whispered. Back at the Moretti mansion, Emma woke with a strange feeling in her heart. She touched the empty side of the bed. It was still warm. She smiled sadly. I already miss you. She walked into the nursery and gently folded the baby's tiny clothes. On the dresser stood a framed photograph of her and Adrian on their wedding day. She picked it up and kissed the glass. Come back safely. Hours later, the jet crossed over the Atlantic on a confidential business mission related to the Moretti family's international companies. Then, without warning, communication with the aircraft stopped. The radar signal disappeared. News agencies reported only one thing. A private aircraft carrying billionaire Adrian Moretti had gone missing. No one knew what had happened. Chicago exploded with rumors. Television reporters gathered outside the Moretti mansion. Police vehicles blocked the entrance. Business partners demanded answers. Emma stood frozen in front of the television. No, she whispered. No, this can't be true. She kept calling Adrian's phone. Again, and again, and again. There was never an answer. 3 days passed. Then 7. Then 14. Search teams found scattered pieces of aircraft debris in a remote mountainous area. There was no confirmed evidence that Adrian had survived. Victor gathered the family's advisors inside the mansion. His face looked tired. His voice trembled. We've waited long enough. The authorities believe my brother is gone. Silence filled the room. Emma burst into tears. She shook her head. No. He promised me he'd come home. He always keeps his promises. But even as she spoke, fear slowly settled into her heart. The funeral was held without a coffin. Thousands attended. Business leaders, police officials, old friends, employees who had worked for Adrian for years. Everyone mourned the man they believed had died. Emma stood dressed in black, holding Adrian's wedding ring tightly in her hand. She couldn't bring herself to let it go. As everyone left, she remained alone, looking at the empty memorial, still hoping, still waiting. Weeks turned into months. Emma gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She named him Leon. The child had Adrian's blue eyes. Every time she looked into them, she remembered her husband's promise. I'll come back. Some nights, she believed she heard Adrian's footsteps outside. She would run to the front door, only to find silence. Meanwhile, Victor slowly took control of the Moretti companies. Employees who remained loyal to Adrian were fired. Trusted advisors disappeared from important positions. The mansion became colder. The laughter that once filled its halls was gone. Emma noticed the change. So did everyone else. Victor smiled politely in front of outsiders. But whenever they were alone, his mask disappeared. "You should stop waiting," he told Emma one evening. "My brother isn't coming back." Emma looked him directly in the eyes. "As long as I breathe, I'll believe he's alive." Victor turned away without another word. For the first time, his carefully planned lie had met someone stronger than fear. Far away, in an isolated medical facility under heavy security, a man slowly opened his eyes. His vision was blurred. Machines beeped around him. The doctor leaned forward in surprise. "Mr. Moretti, you're awake." Adrian tried to speak. Only one word escaped his lips. "Gemma." The steady beep of the heart monitor echoed through the quiet hospital room. Adrian Moretti slowly opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar. His entire body felt heavy. For several seconds, he couldn't remember where he was. Then, Emma, the baby, Chicago. Everything rushed back at once. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain forced him back onto the bed. A doctor hurried into the room. "Mr. Moretti, please don't move." Adrian looked at him with confusion. "How long have I been here?" The doctor hesitated. "You've been unconscious for almost 8 months." Adrian froze. 8 months. His face turned pale. "My wife, my child." The doctor handed him a glass of water. "You were rescued after your aircraft went down in a remote mountain region. You suffered severe injuries and remained unconscious for months." Adrian closed his eyes. The last thing he remembered was promising Emma that he would return in 3 days. Instead, 8 months had disappeared. Meanwhile, Chicago had changed. Victor Moretti now controlled the family's businesses. The mansion that once echoed with laughter had become silent. Emma no longer wore expensive dresses. She spent most of her time caring for little Leon. The little boy had just begun taking his first steps. Every morning, he pointed toward Adrian's photograph on the wall. "Mama, Dada." Emma smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. That's your father. He loves you very much." Although Leon had never met Adrian, Emma spoke about him every single day. She refused to let her son grow up without knowing the man his father truly was. Victor watched all of this with growing anger. He hated seeing Adrian's photograph still hanging in the house. One afternoon, he walked into the living room. Without saying a word, he took the frame from the wall. Emma immediately stood. "Oh, what are you doing?" Victor looked at the photograph coldly. "Dead men don't belong in this house anymore." Emma stepped forward. "He is not dead." Victor laughed. "Still dreaming?" She gently took the photograph back. "As long as there is no proof, I will keep believing." Victor walked away without another word. But inside, his patience was beginning to disappear. Back at the hospital, Adrian insisted on leaving. The doctors refused. "You still need treatment." "I've already lost 8 months. I won't lose another day." After several days of recovery, he was finally discharged. The first thing he did was call home. The number had changed. He called old business partners. Many refused to answer. Others sounded nervous. One elderly employee finally whispered, "Sir, everyone believes you died, and Mr. Victor has taken control." Adrian stood silent. "What about Emma?" The man hesitated. "She's alive. She never stopped waiting for you." Those words broke Adrian's heart. Adrian quietly returned to Chicago. He didn't announce his arrival. He wanted to see everything with his own eyes. Late that evening, a black car stopped across the street from the Moretti mansion. Adrian looked through the window. The mansion looked the same, yet it somehow felt different. The lights were dim. The gardens were neglected. The warmth was gone. He whispered, "What happened to my home?" Inside the mansion, Emma tucked Leon into bed. She kissed his forehead. "Good night, my little prince." The little boy smiled. "Mama, when Daddy comes, can we all play together?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. She forced herself to smile. "Yes, one day we will." Outside, standing in the shadows across the street, Adrian saw the bedroom light turn off. He placed one trembling hand against the car window. Only a few meters separated him from his family. Yet after 8 long months, he didn't know how to walk back into their lives. He had returned to Chicago, but he had no idea the greatest battle of his life was only beginning. The sun rose over Chicago, but Adrian Moretti remained hidden inside a small apartment owned by Lorenzo, the elderly family advisor who had once served Adrian's father. When Lorenzo opened the door and saw Adrian standing there, his walking cane slipped from his hand. His eyes filled with tears. "Adrian, my God, you're alive!" The two men embraced silently. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lorenzo stepped back. "We all believed we had lost you." Adrian looked toward the mansion in the distance. "What happened while I was gone?" Lorenzo's smile disappeared. "You need to prepare yourself." For the next 2 hours, Lorenzo told Adrian everything. How Victor had taken control. How loyal employees had been dismissed. How Emma had refused to believe Adrian was dead. How she had raised little Leon alone. Every word felt like another knife in Adrian's heart. Then Lorenzo stopped speaking. "There is something else." Adrian looked at him. "What is it?" Lorenzo lowered his eyes. "Victor has humiliated Emma many times." Adrian's hands slowly closed into fists. "What did he do?" "He wanted everyone to believe she had lost all hope." Lorenzo swallowed. One day, during a gathering at the mansion, Victor ordered that Emma's long hair be cut short in front of everyone to embarrass and intimidate her. The room fell silent. Adrian couldn't speak. He remembered how much Emma loved her hair. He remembered brushing it aside on their wedding day. He remembered promising to protect her. Now, someone had used it to humiliate her. Adrian closed his eyes. "I wasn't there." His voice barely rose above a whisper. That evening, Emma stood alone in front of her bedroom mirror. Her hair had started growing again, but it was still much shorter than before. She gently touched it. The memory still hurt, not because of the hair itself, but because that day she had felt completely alone. Then she looked toward little Leon sleeping peacefully. She smiled. "I survived for you." Across the city, Victor celebrated another successful business deal. His followers laughed loudly around the dinner table. Victor lifted his glass. "To the future." One of the men asked, "And if Adrian somehow returns?" Everyone laughed. Victor smiled confidently. "Dead men don't come home." Hidden in the shadows outside the restaurant, Adrian watched silently. He didn't walk in. He didn't reveal himself. He wanted the truth first. He wanted proof. Lorenzo placed a hand on his shoulder. "Revenge is easy. Justice takes patience." Adrian nodded slowly. "You're right. I'm not here to destroy my family. I'm here to bring them back together." The next morning, Emma took Leon to a nearby park. Leon chased pigeons across the grass, while Emma sat quietly on a bench. Without realizing it, another man sat on the opposite side of the park, wearing a baseball cap and dark sunglasses. It was Adrian. He watched his son laugh for the very first time. Tears quietly rolled down his face. "My son," he whispered, "I missed your first smile, your first words, your first steps." He had faced powerful enemies all his life. Nothing had ever hurt this much. Just then, Leon tripped and fell onto the grass. Before Emma could reach him, Adrian instinctively stood. He took one step forward, then stopped. If Emma saw him now, everything would change. He slowly stepped back into the crowd. Emma picked Leon up and kissed his forehead. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here." Adrian turned away, hiding his tears. "For a little longer," he whispered. "Soon, you'll know your father came back." As he disappeared into the busy streets of Chicago, he made himself one final promise. No more lies, no more fear. This family would never be torn apart again. 3 days passed. Adrian stayed hidden. Every hour, he learned something new about what had happened during the 8 months. He had been gone. Lorenzo quietly introduced him to a few people who had remained loyal to the Moretti family. None of them could believe their eyes.
"The boss?"
"You're alive." Adrian shook each of their hands. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for the truth." One evening, an elderly housekeeper named Maria arrived at Lorenzo's apartment. She had worked at the Moretti mansion for over 20 years. The moment she saw Adrian, she burst into tears. "Sir, I prayed every night that you were alive." Adrian hugged her gently. "Tell me about Emma." Maria wiped away her tears. "She never accepted that you were gone. Every birthday, every anniversary, every night. She talked to your photograph." Adrian lowered his head. "And Leon?" Maria smiled through her tears. "He's a wonderful little boy. He has your eyes. And Emma's kind heart." Maria then placed a small cardboard box on the table. "I've been keeping these safe." Adrian slowly opened it. Inside were dozens of letters. Every one of them was written by Emma. None had ever been sent. The first letter read, "Adrian, today our son smiled for the first time. I wish you had been here to see it. I still believe you'll come home." The second letter, "Leon took his first steps today. He walked toward your photograph." The third letter, "People keep telling me to move on, but my heart says you're still alive." Adrian couldn't read any further. Tears rolled silently down his face. He had missed 8 months of his family's life, but Emma had never stopped loving him. The following morning, Victor announced a grand charity gala at the Moretti mansion. Business leaders, politicians, and journalists from across Chicago were invited. Victor wanted everyone to see him as the new face of the family. Emma didn't want to attend, but Victor insisted. "You still carry the Moretti name. You'll be there." Emma quietly agreed for Leon's sake. That evening the mansion sparkled with lights. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Music echoed through the grand hall. Guests laughed and posed for photographs. Victor stood at the center of the room, greeting everyone with a confident smile. Emma arrived wearing a simple navy blue dress. Her hair, though still shorter than before, had begun to grow back. She wasn't dressed like a queen anymore, but she carried herself with quiet dignity. Many guests whispered as she walked past. Some felt sympathy, others simply looked away. Across the street, a black sedan came to a stop. Adrian stepped out. He wore a dark suit. No bodyguards. No convoy. Just one man returning home. Lorenzo looked at him. "Are you ready?" Adrian took a deep breath. "For 8 months they believed I was dead. Tonight, the truth comes home." He walked toward the mansion gates. The security guards looked at him. For a moment, neither of them moved. One guard's face turned white. "Boss?" Adrian simply nodded. "Open the gate." The heavy iron gate slowly swung open. Inside the ballroom, Victor raised a glass to make a speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks a new chapter for the Moretti family." Before he could finish, the massive entrance doors opened. Every conversation stopped. Every camera turned. Emma slowly looked toward the entrance. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. Standing in the doorway was Adrian Moretti, alive. The room fell into complete silence. Emma whispered with trembling lips, "Adrian?" The grand ballroom fell completely silent. More than 200 guests stood frozen. No one blinked. No one spoke. Only the sound of a broken glass echoed across the marble floor. Adrian Moretti stood at the entrance, calm and composed. His dark suit was simple. There were no bodyguards behind him. No display of power. Just a man who had finally returned home. Emma stared at him in disbelief. Her hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered again, "Adrian?" For a brief second, she wondered if she was dreaming. 8 months. 8 long months. She had prayed for this moment every single night. Adrian looked only at Emma. The crowded room disappeared around him. Nothing else mattered. He slowly walked toward her. Each step felt heavier than the last. Emma couldn't move. Her heart wanted to run to him. Her mind was afraid this was another cruel illusion. When Adrian finally stood in front of her, he gently reached into his pocket. He pulled out their wedding ring, the one he had worn every day. He placed it in Emma's shaking hand. "I promised you I would come back." Emma burst into tears. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him. The ballroom remained silent as husband and wife embraced for the first time in 8 months. Many guests quietly wiped away tears. Even people who had never liked Adrian couldn't deny the emotion of the moment. Little Leon, who had been playing with a toy near the staircase, looked curiously toward the crowd. He tugged gently on Emma's dress. "Mama, who is he?" Emma knelt beside her son, tears still streaming down her face. Her voice trembled with happiness. "Leon, this is your daddy." The little boy looked up at Adrian with innocent blue eyes. For a few seconds, he simply stared. Then he slowly opened his tiny arms. Adrian dropped to one knee and hugged his son tightly. His shoulders shook as he cried, "I missed everything. I'm so sorry." Leon didn't understand the words. He simply hugged his father back. For Adrian, it was the greatest moment of his life. Across the room, Victor stood frozen. The color drained from his face. This can't be possible. Several guests looked at him with confusion. One businessman whispered, "I thought Adrian was dead." Another replied, "So did all of us." Victor quickly forced a smile. "Brother, you survived. What a miracle." Adrian slowly stood. His expression remained calm. "I survived." He looked directly into Victor's eyes. "And now, I want the truth." The room became silent once again. Victor laughed nervously. "What truth?" "We all believed you were gone." Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the ballroom. "I don't want lies. I don't want excuses. I only want honesty." His words carried through the hall. Several old employees lowered their heads. They knew difficult days were coming. Emma quietly held Adrian's hand. She noticed he had become thinner. There was a scar near his temple. His face looked older. Life had changed him. Adrian noticed Emma's shorter hair. He gently touched it. His eyes filled with sadness. "You don't have to tell me today." "But I promise. I'll always stand beside you now." Emma nodded silently. For the first time in months, she no longer felt alone. The celebration had completely ended. Guests quietly left the mansion. Outside, reporters gathered behind security barriers. Camera flashes lit up the night. News spread across Chicago within minutes. Adrian Moretti was alive. Inside the mansion, the family sat together in the living room. Little Leon had fallen asleep in Adrian's arms. Adrian smiled softly as he watched his son sleeping. Emma sat beside him. Neither of them wanted to break the silence. Finally, Emma whispered, "I stopped believing with my eyes, but I never stopped believing with my heart." Adrian gently kissed her forehead. "And your heart was right." Across the hall, Victor watched from the shadows. His face was expressionless, but inside, fear had replaced confidence. He realized something he had never imagined. The man he had buried with a lie had walked back through the front door, and this time, the truth had come with him. The morning after Adrian's return, Chicago woke up to only one headline. Billionaire Adrian Moretti returns after 8 months. Television stations replayed the footage over and over again. Business channels called it a miracle. Social media exploded with questions. How had he survived? Where had he been? And if Adrian was alive, who had declared him dead inside the Moretti mansion? For the first time in months, the breakfast table felt alive again. Emma poured coffee while Adrian sat beside little Leon. The little boy couldn't stop staring at his father. "Daddy?" Adrian smiled. "Yes? Are you going away again?" The question pierced Adrian's heart. He gently held his son's tiny hand. "No, I've already missed too much. I want to watch you grow." Leon smiled and hugged him tightly. Emma quietly wiped away another tear. This was the family she had dreamed of every night. But across the hallway, Victor listened in silence. Every laugh coming from the dining room made his anger grow. He had waited years to become the head of the Moretti family. Now Adrian had returned, and everything Victor had built on lies was beginning to crack. Later that afternoon, Lorenzo arrived carrying a small leather briefcase. "I've been collecting records ever since you disappeared," he said. He placed several folders on Adrian's desk. "They may help answer your questions." Adrian carefully opened the first folder. Inside were copies of business transfers, meeting schedules, and handwritten notes. The dates all pointed to one thing. Victor had started taking control of the family. Businesses almost immediately after Adrian was declared missing. "He moved very quickly," Adrian murmured. Lorenzo nodded. "Too quickly." Emma entered the office carrying tea. She noticed the files spread across the desk. "You've been working all morning." Adrian smiled gently. "I promised I'd come home. I also have to understand what happened while I was gone." Emma sat beside him. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Adrian looked at her. I'm sorry. Emma frowned. For what? I wasn't here when you needed me most. Emma shook her head. You didn't choose to disappear. What matters is, you found your way back. Adrian reached for her hand. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for those lost months. Emma smiled for the first time in a long while. I don't want the past. I just want our future. That evening, Adrian walked alone into the mansion's old music room. It had been untouched for months. On top of the piano sat a dusty wooden box. Inside, he found dozens of family photographs, wedding pictures, holiday memories, baby ultrasound images, and one picture of Emma laughing in the garden, her long hair dancing in the wind. Adrian held the photograph carefully. He smiled sadly. Then he whispered, They tried to take your smile away, but they failed. He placed the picture back into the box. This house had witnessed love. Now, it would witness the truth. Outside the mansion, the rain began to fall. Victor stood beneath the balcony, staring into the darkness. He realized something he had refused to accept. Adrian wasn't just back. The family's hope had returned with him, and hope was far more powerful than fear. A cold rain covered Chicago. Dark clouds hung over the Moretti mansion, as if the city itself knew a storm was coming. Inside the mansion, every employee moved carefully. No one laughed. No one spoke loudly. Everyone knew the peace wouldn't last. Adrian stood alone in his father's old study. The room smelled of old leather books and cedar wood. On the wall hung a large portrait of his late father, Alessandro Moretti. As a young boy, Adrian had stood in this very room and made one promise. No matter what happens, this family will stay together. Now he looked at the portrait again. I'm sorry, Father. I couldn't keep that promise. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Victor walked inside without waiting for permission. For several seconds, the two brothers simply stared at one another. Neither smiled. Neither looked away. Victor finally broke the silence. So, the ghost finally came home. Adrian remained calm. I'm not a ghost. I'm your brother. Victor laughed bitterly. My brother disappeared. You came back as a stranger. Adrian took one slow step forward. No, I came back to the same house. You changed it. Victor folded his arms. You think everyone still belongs to you? You've been gone for 8 months. I kept this family alive. Adrian looked directly into his eyes. Keeping a family alive doesn't mean taking away their hope. It doesn't mean making Emma believe I was gone forever. Victor's face hardened. I told her what everyone believed. Adrian answered quietly. No, you told her what benefited you. The room fell silent again. Outside the study, Emma unknowingly stopped in the hallway. The voices inside were calm, but every word carried years of pain. She didn't enter. She simply listened. Victor slowly walked toward the window. You were always Father's favorite. You got the respect, the business, the future. What did I get? Adrian's expression softened. You got a brother who would have given you anything. Victor turned around. I didn't want anything. I wanted everything. Those words confirmed what Adrian had feared all along. This wasn't about misunderstanding. It was about envy. Adrian reached into his jacket and placed an old family photograph on the desk. It showed 2 young brothers smiling beside their father. I still remember this day. You fell into the lake. I jumped in after you. Victor looked at the picture for a moment. Then he pushed it away. That was a long time ago. Adrian nodded sadly. Yes, but I never stopped seeing you as my little brother. Victor looked away. For the first time, there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes. Emma quietly walked back to Leon's room. She looked at her sleeping son, then at the wedding photograph beside the bed. She whispered, I don't want my son to grow up with hate. Downstairs, the conversation ended without shouting, without threats, without violence. But both brothers understood one thing. The truth could no longer stay hidden. As Victor left the study, he glanced over his shoulder. This isn't over. Adrian answered calmly, I know. But this time, the truth isn't alone. Outside, the rain finally stopped. For the first time in months, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds and shone across the Moretti mansion. It felt like a sign. The darkness was beginning to fade. The rain had finally stopped. For the first time in months, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Moretti mansion. Emma stood in the nursery, watching little Leon stack colorful wooden blocks on the floor. He laughed every time the tower collapsed. His innocent laughter filled the room. It reminded Emma that no matter how dark life became, hope always found a way back. Downstairs, Adrian had spent the entire morning reviewing old family records with Lorenzo. Boxes filled with files covered the large oak table. Most of them contained business documents. Some held family memories. While searching through an old cabinet, Lorenzo suddenly paused. There shouldn't be anything behind this shelf. He gently pulled the wooden panel aside. A small metal box appeared. Its lock had long since rusted away. Adrian carefully opened it. Inside were old letters, photographs, and a small leather notebook belonging to his late father. Adrian slowly turned the pages. Most contained personal thoughts. Then one folded envelope slipped onto the table. Across the front, his father's handwriting read, "For Adrian. If I'm no longer here." Adrian stared silently before opening it. The letter was short, but every word carried weight. A leader protects his family before he protects his empire. If one day power divides, my sons, remember that truth is stronger than fear. Adrian folded the letter carefully. His father had never cared most about power. He had cared about family. Just then, Emma entered the room carrying tea. She noticed another envelope lying inside the box. It was different. There was no name on the front, only a date. 8 months earlier. "The day you disappeared," Emma whispered. Adrian looked at her. "Open it." Inside was a printed copy of an emergency message. It stated that contact with Adrian's aircraft had been lost. At the bottom was a handwritten note. "Do not announce anything until the authorities confirm the facts." Emma frowned. "This note. It means no one was supposed to declare you dead." Lorenzo nodded slowly. "Exactly." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "But someone ignored that warning." Emma looked up. "Victor?" No one answered. No one needed to. Later that evening, Emma walked through the quiet halls of the mansion. She stopped outside the family library. The door was slightly open. Inside, Victor was speaking on the phone. His voice was low. "I told everyone Adrian was gone. Once people believed it, there was no turning back." Emma's heart skipped. She couldn't hear the rest. A floorboard creaked beneath her foot. Victor instantly looked toward the doorway. "Who's there?" Emma stepped back before he could see her and quietly walked away, her hands trembling. She didn't have the full truth yet, but for the first time, she realized Victor hadn't simply been mistaken. He had chosen to convince everyone Adrian would never return. That night, Emma sat beside Adrian on the balcony overlooking the city lights. She held the letter from Adrian's father in her hands. "I used to think this house was built with stone," she said softly, "but it was built with trust." Adrian looked at the glowing skyline. "And trust can be broken." Emma gently squeezed his hand. "Then we'll build it again." Adrian smiled, for the first time since coming home. He truly believed they could. But inside another wing of the mansion, Victor stood alone in the darkness. He looked at an old photograph of himself and Adrian as children. For a brief moment, regret crossed his face. Then it disappeared. He placed the photograph face down on the desk. Outside, thunder rolled across the Chicago sky. A new storm was coming, and this one would reveal the whole truth. The next morning, Adrian made a decision. He would not argue in secret. He would not spread rumors. He wanted the truth spoken where everyone could hear it. So he asked Lorenzo to invite every senior member of the Moretti family, the family's lawyers, and the heads of their legitimate companies to the mansion that evening. No one knew the reason. By sunset, the grand conference hall was full. The room that had once celebrated victories now felt heavy with silence. Emma sat beside Adrian. Little Leon was upstairs with Maria, sleeping peacefully. Victor entered last. He wore a confident smile. But the moment he saw everyone gathered, his smile faded. "What is all this?" he asked. Adrian stood. "It's time our family hears the truth." No one interrupted. Adrian walked slowly to the center of the room. 8 months ago, my aircraft disappeared. Communication was lost, but there was never official confirmation of my death. He placed the emergency notice on the table. Lorenzo handed copies to everyone present. Several people looked at each other in surprise. One of the lawyers spoke quietly. This clearly says no public announcement should be made until the investigation was complete. Another advisor nodded. Then why was a funeral arranged so quickly? Every eye turned toward Victor. Victor remained calm. I acted because the family needed leadership. Adrian looked at him. Leadership is not the same as certainty. You told Emma I was gone forever. You told our employees to move on. You removed my photograph. You dismissed people who stayed loyal. Victor folded his arms. I did what I believed was necessary. Emma stood for the first time. Her voice was calm but filled with emotion. No, you did what was necessary for yourself. The room became silent again. Victor looked at Emma in disbelief. You believe him over me? Emma met his eyes. I believe the truth. Lorenzo then placed another folder on the table. These are dated records, showing major leadership changes made within days of Adrian's disappearance. One board member frowned. So plans to replace Adrian began almost immediately. Victor didn't answer. For the first time, he had no easy explanation. Adrian didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at his younger brother. Victor, if you had been honest, if you had protected Emma, if you had protected Leon, I would have shared everything I own with you. Victor stared at the floor. His hands trembled slightly. Years of jealousy had brought him exactly where he stood now. Completely alone, Emma quietly took Adrian's hand. She remembered every lonely night, every birthday Adrian had missed, every time Leon had asked about his father. She looked at Victor. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted my family back. Those words echoed through the room. Even the people who had once supported Victor lowered their heads. Outside the mansion, snow began to fall. Inside, no one celebrated. No one shouted. The truth itself was enough. Adrian looked around the room. Our father built this family on loyalty. I won't let lies define our future. The meeting ended in complete silence, but everyone understood one thing. The Moretti family would never be the same again. As the last guest walked out, Victor remained standing alone in the empty hall. He looked at the chair where Adrian had once sat as head of the family. For the first time in his life, he realized that power without trust was an empty throne. The mansion had finally become quiet. The guests had left. The lawyers had gone home. Outside, snow continued to fall over Chicago. Inside the nursery, little Leon slept peacefully, holding a small stuffed teddy bear against his chest. Adrian stood beside his son's bed for several minutes. He watched every breath, every tiny movement, every innocent smile that appeared while Leon dreamed. A tear rolled down Adrian's cheek. I missed your first word, he whispered. I missed your first birthday. I missed everything. Behind him, Emma quietly entered the room. She didn't say anything. She simply placed her hand in Adrian's for a long moment. They stood together, watching their son sleep. Later that night, Emma led Adrian into a small storage room at the end of the hallway. I've never shown this to anyone. She opened an old wooden cabinet. Inside were dozens of carefully labeled boxes. Every box carried a date. Adrian looked at her with confusion. What are these? Emma smiled sadly. They're memories. She opened the first box. Inside was Leon's tiny hospital bracelet, the day he was born. The second box held a tiny pair of baby shoes. His first steps. The third contained a birthday candle. His first birthday. Then came a child's first drawing, a small toy car, a tiny knitted sweater, every milestone Adrian had missed. Emma had carefully saved. I wanted you to see everything one day, she whispered. I never stopped believing you'd come home. Adrian could no longer hold back his tears. He sat down quietly, one by one. He looked through every memory. Each one reminded him of the life he had lost, but also of the love Emma had protected. Emma then handed him a worn-out notebook. I wrote in this every night. Adrian opened it. The first page read, Day 1 without Adrian. The second, Leon smiled today. Another page. Today he said Mama for the first time. Another. He pointed at your picture and called you Daddy. Adrian closed the notebook. His hands were shaking. I don't deserve you. Emma immediately shook her head. Don't ever say that. You didn't abandon us. You fought your way back. The next morning, Adrian walked into the mansion's garden. The snow sparkled beneath the morning sun. He noticed fresh footprints, small ones. Leon was outside with Maria building a tiny snowman. "Daddy!" Leon shouted happily. "Come help me!" Adrian laughed. It was the first carefree laugh Emma had heard from him in months. Together. Father and son finished the snowman. Leon proudly smiled. "It needs a hat." Adrian removed his own wool cap and placed it on top of the snowman. "There? Perfect." Leon hugged him tightly. Emma watched from the balcony above. For the first time since Adrian's disappearance, she felt peace, not because the past had disappeared, but because the future finally looked bright again. Across town, Victor sat alone in a luxury apartment. The television replayed yesterday's meeting. Every headline praised Adrian's return. No one mentioned Victor as a hero anymore. His phone remained silent. The people who once surrounded him had disappeared. He looked around the empty apartment. For the first time, he understood what loneliness truly felt like. He whispered to himself, "I wanted power, but I lost my family." Back at the mansion, Adrian looked toward the Chicago skyline. He wrapped one arm around Emma. With the other, he lifted Leon into his arms. "No matter what happens," he said softly, "this family will never be separated again." Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "I believe you." The winter sun slowly broke through the clouds, as hope finally returned to the Moretti family. A week passed. Snow still covered the streets of Chicago, but inside the Moretti mansion, life had slowly begun to return. Every morning, Adrian had breakfast with Emma and Leon. Every evening, he read bedtime stories to his son. These were ordinary moments, but to Adrian, they were priceless. He had spent 8 long months dreaming of a life this simple. Now he refused to waste another minute. One afternoon, Lorenzo entered Adrian's office carrying a single envelope. "There is someone waiting outside." "Who?" Lorenzo hesitated. "Victor." The room became silent. Emma looked at Adrian. "You don't have to see him." Adrian thought for a moment, then quietly replied, "No, it's time." Victor entered alone. Gone were the expensive suits. Gone was the confidence. He looked tired, older. For a long time, neither brother spoke. Finally, Victor broke the silence. "I didn't come here to ask for power. I came because I don't want to carry this hatred anymore." Adrian remained calm. Victor looked down at the floor. "When we were children, I always believed Father loved you more. I spent years trying to become you, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be myself." His voice trembled. "I made choices I'll regret for the rest of my life." Emma quietly stepped into the room. Victor looked at her, his eyes filled with shame. "I'm sorry. I can't erase what I put you through. I can't give back the months you lost." Emma remained silent for several seconds. Then she answered softly, "Some wounds never disappear, but I won't let them turn me into someone filled with hate." Victor lowered his head. It was more mercy than he believed he deserved. Little Leon suddenly ran into the office. "Daddy!" He stopped when he noticed Victor. He looked up at Adrian. "Who's he?" Adrian smiled sadly. "He's your uncle." Leon waved politely. "Hello." Victor forced a small smile. That innocent greeting shattered something inside him. He realized that the child he had ignored carried no anger, only kindness. Victor reached into his coat and removed a small wooden toy. It was an old, handcrafted train. "Our father made this for us when we were boys." He placed it on the desk. "I kept it all these years. It belongs here." Adrian picked up the toy. He remembered playing with it beside Victor decades earlier. For a brief moment, the two brothers weren't enemies. They were simply two boys who had lost their way. Victor turned toward the door. "I'm leaving Chicago. I need to find out who I am without power." Adrian didn't stop him. He simply said, "I hope one day you find peace." Victor nodded once, then quietly walked away. Neither brother looked back. That evening, Emma, Adrian, and Leon stood together on the balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glittered beneath the winter stars. Leon held his father's hand with one hand, and his mother's with the other. Adrian smiled. "When I disappeared, I thought I'd lost everything, but love waited for me." Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "And this time, we'll face tomorrow together." Below them, Chicago carried on with its endless noise, but high above the city, inside the Moretti mansion. Hello, friends! A family that had been torn apart by lies finally found its way home. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. A shocking secret is still hidden inside the Moretti family, and it could change everything. What do you think Victor deserves, forgiveness or punishment? Tell me in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to Midnight Story Studio, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. See you in the next story.